Good morning and good afternoon. It's April Reigne here, and we are live on Awake Radio, and we've got Michael Warnken here today. He's the guy who actually sued the Terminator. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good. And now you're out in California, so this is a little early for you.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's 8 in the morning.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. Do you... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Do you want to tell folks how you kind of got started in realizing things aren't working the way that they should be, or that they were intended to be working?
Yeah, about 10 years ago, I found myself in a certain political hell. I guess that's the best way to put it. And I guess, I can say I'm a red-blooded American, and I looked around, and, you're raised in a certain way where you think things are right. Here in America, they teach you anybody to be president. They almost raise you thinking that. And, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all. And, for all intents and purposes, we think things are right. And a lot of times you're taught that, things in other countries are awful or crazy or just completely corrupt. And little do you know, that very same thing is going on here, and you just had never been aware of it until it hits you. So it was about 10 years ago, and I found myself staring straight at political corruption. And it was vast, and it was just absolutely amazing. I just couldn't believe it was going on so blatantly, so often, and not only that I just never heard of it. And why is this going on? And so awfully, and you tell people that, and it's almost like a lot of them didn't believe it. And even to this day, a lot of people don't believe it until they stare at it themselves, and they end up facing it, and they say, "Wow, everything you said was exactly like you said. It's really awful and corrupt." And so I ended up, a lot of what I was dealing with was corrupt judiciaries, people who are, in the executive branch of government, police and prosecutors who are just doing things that were just completely amazing. I mean, the whole court system, that supposed fact-finding system that we had, it wasn't about fact-finding. It was about, I'm watching people being convicted unilaterally, over nothing. I'm watching, I was helping a woman who was going through a divorce action, and it was just absolutely amazing to me. I mean, they were just damaging this person. And, I just, for the life of me, I could not figure out how it was happening. And a lot of the time I was spending researching just judicial corruption. And the judiciary, I just found, was just out of control. I mean, I had judges yell at me for nothing. And after a while, you realize what they're doing is trying to secure, somebody else other than yourself, a victory. It's not about, right or wrong. It's about how to make sure that somebody wins, and they don't really give a damn what happens to you or anybody else. And so anyway, I spent a whole bunch of time researching, and, there were just a whole bunch of cases. I want to say Stone versus such and such. This judge worked with somebody who was suing another party just to steal the guy's land. And, there was another case that was out of Alabama where this judge had sex with a female criminal defendant for leniency. So this judge had sex with this woman who was accused of crime just, so he could lower her sentence. And I was just looking at corruption just everywhere. It was funny. I was starting to see there's a whole bunch of people put up websites. It's not like they're mainstream websites, and it's not like there's an investigative newspaper that are leading you to these things. You just Google judicial corruption, and I couldn't believe it. And one day, I ran into New Hampshire had just impeached they have a 5-man Supreme Court. They were impeaching 3 of their 5 Supreme Court judges. And it was over rather minor issues. Basically, the initiating action was a woman and a man were getting divorced, and the woman wanted the trial court. And the Supreme Court in New Hampshire is their only appellate court. And what happened was the husband used to be a law partner with the Chief Justice, and he said, hey, can you pull me up there and reverse it? And the Supreme Court did. And the legislature found out, and they went after him. Like, the vote for impeachment in the House was 242 to 117. And I'm sitting there, what is in the water? And not only that, I mean, what they were doing is stuff that I watched go on in the California courts regularly. So I started asking, like, what in the heck is going on there? And it was 2 months later that I found out that, you know, it was always stuck in my head. I found out that New Hampshire had 400 reps. And I was like, that's a lot. And that's a small state. You know, what's the population? 1.2 million. So when you crank that out, that's one representative for every 3,000 people. I said, wow. Well, I'm in California. What's our population? Oh, 34 million. How many reps do we have? 80.
Jeez.
And, yeah, that's one for every 425,000. And I started saying to myself, that's got to be the reason. The numbers were so crazy, I couldn't believe it. And it took me like a week to digest the whole thing. And so I started collecting all the information on all the states, all the populations, and you know, it was staggering to me. Yeah, states like New Hampshire and Vermont, you know, 3,000 and 4,000 to 1 in the lower chamber. Texas, they have one for every 160,000. California, we have today one for almost 500,000 people in our lower chamber, and our Senate, our state Senate, has one senator for every 1,000,000 people. And I'm not talking U.S. Senate, I'm talking state Senate. And so that kind of put me on a big, I don't know, big drive to start looking at this. And what I've come to find is the better your representation is, the greater your civil liberties. And I guess that's the issue in a nutshell. And it was an issue that our founders discussed, and it's very real. And the thing of it is most people do not see it, aren't aware of it, have no idea that it goes on, don't know if you have good representation, and you don't know that you have good affection, you don't know if you have bad representation until it smacks you in the face. So, anyway, that's how it started.
Well, I think it's one of those things that's just so obvious that we don't see it. You know,
yeah.
we keep hearing about this representation, and then we're like, well, I don't feel like I'm getting any. And it's it just seems like it's just so clear, you know, right there, you know, just don't see it, don't realize. Oh, that's the key. So what is it? Pardon me?
Our founders were, you know, it was one of the biggest things that they discussed was, you know, taxation without representation. And George Washington said, you know, they were mulling around. In the U.S. Constitution, when they first started, they said 40,000 was representation. And a lot of the other founders, particularly a group of people called the Anti-Federalists, they thought that was crazy. 40,000 to 1. There was no authority in history that could back it. And Montesquieu, if you look through the Federalist Papers, the founders, they refer to Montesquieu quite a bit. And Montesquieu said representation 5,000 to 1, not 40,000. And so they were protesting. And finally, the Federalists, who, you know, George Washington, a lot of the people that we, you know, hold in high regard, they finally said 30,000. And sort of the reason they did that was that they felt that there weren't really a lot of good men who were really smart and capable. So they wanted to keep that number down. And I hold a lot of our founders in disregard over that, because that's the biggest reason why America is so awful right, because of that horrid representation. But yeah, I mean, you know, and so, you know, finally they said 30,000 to 1, and they didn't put a you know, even the language in the U.S. Constitution doesn't solidify that. You know, and at some point in time, 1913, basically the House froze when there were 92,000 people in America. So, yeah, that's, you know, and ever since then, you know, back in 1912, basically each U.S. House member had about, you know, 90,000 people. And today I shouldn't say that. It's about 200,000 people. And today each House member has 710,000 people. And it's just, and as the population grows, the districts get bigger, our reps get further from us, they ignore us, and I hate to say it, but that's basically where things are going.
So what is it that folks should really be looking at? I mean, should we be doing what you suggest, which is get more representation in our systems going? And how do we address our own states with that issue?
Yeah, there's a big issue with that. We see Baker versus Carr was the first time that litigation led to an increase in representation. I mean, for a while, what had happened is just on their own, states would increase their own representation, and that kind of happens from place to place, and it varies on state to state. Like Oregon, they started with 20 senators and 40 assembly members, and I don't know, and I think I think Oregon was formed in 1860. So it made a jump 20 years later to 30 senators and 60 assembly members, and they just never increased. Massachusetts is perhaps the second best example after New Hampshire. In 1812, they had 749 representatives in their lower chamber. Staggering. You had a problem, you took it to your representative, and they resolved it. They had some of the lowest taxes, the fewest problems, a citizenry who was, well protected. And anyway, so yes, here's the thing. We have 50 states, and I think it's in 26 of the states that you can petition to do things. And so one of the first questions, almost anybody who wants to do something about this has to ask is, are you in a state that can actually petition to do this? And, and then the next thing you need to say is, how many reps do we have? What's our population, and what should we bring it to? And, this is where I go back to our founders. Basically, whether you agree with it or not, they said the U.S. House should have 30,000 to 1. In the debate for the Constitutional Convention in 1787, they actually discussed how many people a U.S. senator should represent. Now, obviously, they went with a model of 2 senators per every state, but they said no U.S. senator should represent more than 100,000. And that's kind of interesting because we have state representatives in a lot of states who represent more than 100,000 people. And I mean, let's differentiate between the state Senate and the state House members. House members, the lower chamber, which is supposed to be like a House of Commons, where the common person would have access. I mean, the idea that we have states in which each assembly member has over 100,000 people is absolutely crazy. New York, Florida, Illinois, definitely California, Texas. They have 100 to 160 up to 480, which is where we're at. I have a webpage if anybody wants to take a look at it. It's projectrepresentme.com, and we also have a page on Facebook. Again, Project Represent Me, and I have a lot of these charts showing what the actual representation. So based on where you're at, you can see the states that have the best representation. The representatives will protect you. I mean, our whole founding of America was on the theory of taxation without representation. Basically, England owned the 13 colonies. They owned it.
Right.
And they decided for a long time, how we would go about, our civic affairs and a number of other things. And what basically happened was the King of England entered a war. I'm pretty sure it's a war with France. And he pledged a whole bunch of money. Well, he didn't have it. And so he decided that, he could start taxing us. And we had already started forming various legislative bodies in the 1750s. And they started sending the tax man around. And we're saying, wait a second. And a lot of the Americans were British subjects. And they're like, wait a second. We don't have to pay taxes unless we decide. And Parliament said, no, we're making the decision for you. And they basically said that America was virtually represented in Parliament. Well, there's a much different thing between being actually represented and virtually represented. And even at one point in time, before 1776 and the Revolutionary War occurred, that Parliament actually proposed giving the colonies, I think it was somewhere between 3 and 7 members elected to be in Parliament. And it didn't happen. We were basically shooting by then. But again, the British said we were virtually represented, and we had to pay taxes by virtue of being a British colony directly involved. And one of the few people said no, that's not good enough. And basically, the legislatures that the colonies had formed were saying the same thing. Well, at that time, the legislative bodies in America, I mean, they were tiny. You had one rep for every 600,000 in Rhode Island. So all these representatives are really close to the citizens. They're like, listen, we can't pay this. We're not going to pay this. We're pissed. And basically, the legislatures got together and they declared war. They said enough. When you have good representation, the reps know who you are. They protect you. They come up and defend you. Your liberties are not just what's in writing, it's what they're there to defend. And when you have a small district, you get to see and watch your representative very closely. And if they're not doing the things you want them, you throw them out. You throw them out on their ear. So the question is, where are you and what's your representation? Well, the founders said, basically for the state houses, the lower chamber was supposed to be 10-1. So there was supposed to be 10 for every U.S. House member. So if each U.S. House member represented 30,000, then each state House member was supposed to represent 3,000. The only state in America that has 3,001 representation is New Hampshire, and they actually teach people. Right now, they have a standing grievance committee, and the Attorney General is really upset. Like, there's a lot of people who are going through divorce matters, and judges in New Hampshire are harming people. And so what they're able to do is petition the grievance committee in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, and they're actually they'll call both the person and the judge to the legislature, and they'll hold a hearing. The judges aren't coming. In fact, the Attorney General is telling judges not to go into these hearings. And the legislature is holding for a lot of these people. They're saying, yeah, these judges are damaging people. It's absolutely excellent. So what you need to do is get your state house, if you've got the petition process. You can sue to do it, but suing is much more complicated. It's a much more difficult process to sue to make representation better, but it is an option. And frankly, if somebody was willing to contact me, I'd work with them and help them to do it. The other thing is the city level representation, which I'm big on. Local government, more so even than your state government, was where you as a citizen were supposed to have access to. And like here in California, I'm going to say it boldly, and I don't know that I'm right. We have over 800 cities in California, and your city has 5 to 7 representatives. It doesn't matter really what city you have, and the exception I think is 3 cities. I think Sacramento, Oakland, and Los Angeles. Oh, and San Francisco. They all have more. But otherwise, if you're a city in California, you have 5 or 7 representatives, and it doesn't matter what your population is. So this little town of Dixon I'm nearby, they have 16,000 people, and they got 5 representatives. Another town nearby is Sassoon, 26,000 people, 5 representatives. Anaheim, which had a really huge cop problem. We had cops basically in broad daylight just shooting people. One cop just shot a guy in the back of the head. They have 340,000 people and 5 representatives. L.A. County, which is my poster child, has 10 million people and 5 supervisors. That's where we're at. I feel like I'm monopolizing the time here. Go ahead and say something.
Oh, you're definitely not monopolizing the time. The time's here for you, hon. You know that.
No, well, go ahead. You gotta say something. Give me some direction here.
Well, you were talking about suing to get more representation. Let's back up a little bit and talk about the Terminator, that wonderful guy who, enriched your state and did so much good for it.
Well, I had to. it actually goes all the way back to England. In case of apportionment, you sue the king. And in America, we obviously don't have a king. You sue the chief executive. So I brought a case a couple of years ago against Schwarzenegger because he was our governor. And the funny thing is I really think for his own personal reputation, I think he tried to fix the state. He was our governor for 7 years. In the end, he didn't really do much. I can't really say he did anything that was enduring. But I did bring a case against the governor to increase representation. And, it's kind of interesting. I brought the case, and it's against the governor, and it was to increase our lower chamber, which has 80 representatives for, we almost have 40 million people. And basically, what happened was it's public record. The legislature actually put up their own lawyer, and Arnold had somebody out of the Attorney General's office representing it. And anyway, it's public record what the law firm we have. The legislature has a law firm. It's called the Ledge Council. The lowest paid guy gets $50 an hour. The highest paid guy gets $150 an hour. So basically, you got lawyers that are making $100,000 to $300,000 a year, and they subbed out of the case. And they put in a law firm called Nossaman LLP, who represents all the unions. And the attorney who was representing them, his name was John Kennedy. And he even notes on his webpage that he is a super lawyer. So apparently there are a number of super lawyers across California. So defending the case for an obvious need in more representation was a super lawyer. And we filed a public information request, and they fought it. They wouldn't tell us how much they were paying the guy. But we estimated he was making between $700 and $1,000 an hour to defend, as my friend says, defend their right to ignore us. So, they were fighting this avidly. Yeah, and John Kennedy himself, if you looked at his profile, he represented prison guards. So the prison guards were trying to stop an increase in representation in California because they like a small legislature. It's really easy for them to control a small legislature. If all of a sudden you had a lot of reps, well, God knows what they'll do. Shoot them. They might start doing something for the citizens. So that's basically how the case was brought forward.
Now, yeah, the right to ignore you. Now, when I was talking to you before, you had said something along the lines that they had tried to prove that you were being treated equally.
Yes. The defense that they had was kind of interesting. I used several cases to try and prove my point. But the most important case that I followed was a case called Holder versus Hall, and it was out of Georgia. And basically, there was a lawsuit brought in Georgia. I think it was 1994, and Georgia had county representation, one supervisor per county. So even in California, where at least they've broken down, in their crazy law, Government Code 25,008 says every county shall have 5. So California, it doesn't matter if you're the smallest county, which is Alpine, which has 1,200 people, they have 5 supervisors. And again, Los Angeles County, which has 10 million people, has 5. Well, in Georgia, they had one-man boards of supervisors. And so the NAACP took National Agency for the Advancement of Colored People. They took a case against, I forget, it's Blaylock County or something like that. And they challenged one-man boards of supervisors. And anyway, that had been in place since the founding of America. And so basically what the Supreme Court said was, first of all, they asked them, did they send any petitions? And it was actually a legitimate request. I mean, in theory, even if you only have one supervisor, if they were answering your petitions, well then, we can have board representation. And if they're still taking care of our needs, who cares? But the reality is our needs aren't being taken care of. So I followed what Holder versus Hall, the Supreme Court suggested. So I sent in 16 petitions. I sent them in proofs of service, everything. I didn't get a single answer back from anybody. And so when I filed and sued, my opposition said, well, Mr. Warnken is equally damaged as everybody else. Well, yeah.
You were being treated equally because, that's just what you get. Nobody answering you.
Yeah. Well, they like I say, they said I was equally damaged. So, I lived in Santa Barbara, and my district, my representative had 450,000 people, and somebody else's representative, say in Sacramento, had 450,000. So, you guys are, I mean, it was perverse how they said it. We're all equally damaged. And I circumvented that and said, look, I sent petitions, and I didn't get them answered. And the legislature at that same time, they were helping other people. So for them to survive equal protection, they would have to prove the assembly did nothing for nobody. And the lawyer, for the prison guards, obviously he wasn't representing the legislature. He was representing, a union who has direct access to the legislature. And God knows, if representation increased, all of a sudden somebody other than the prison guards would have access. And so anyway, that's basically how they defended it. And it's, the special interests, and whoever we want to call that, people who give, and I like to say $10,000 checks to our representatives, they have access, and the rest of us, we have nothing. But we have to pay taxes.
Right.
And, if we're forced to pay for this, we don't get anything, and they don't really care. So, I mean, that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think the reason they take the taxes straight out right away is because only idiots would pay a machine that's, killing them. Okay, here you go. So I think that's why they, take it right away.
Yeah.
So crazy. We're totally upside down here. And I love this idea of, going to the states directly and saying, no. This is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, we need to. And the reality is, I mean, as I like to say, I don't think anybody is ignorant of the fact that things are bad. I mean, I think we can all look up very soberly and all say, our government is out of control at this point in time. And, it's one of those things, unless you actually get this problem solved, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
The way things are, they're going to get worse. So, I mean, the hardest thing, though, again, is getting people to see it. I mean, it's just one of those things that, most people don't even know this is going on.
Well, I think also part of the problem is a lot of people want someone else to do all of this for them.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, someone else will take care of it. My neighbor, he gives talks. He's got YouTube videos. He'll take care of this for me. I'm sure you've got neighbors like that on your block.
Yeah, and the bigger thing is that, again, most people don't care until it hits them directly.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Until I saw it happening, until I saw other people getting hammered, I mean, just like absurd ways, too. I mean, those who have power, the executive branch particularly, I mean, at this point in time, it's violent. And one of the main duties of a representative body is to restrain the executive, more so than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, enforce our rights. Our reps are supposed to be like us. They're supposed to have jobs like us. They're supposed to realize the laws they create, affect them also. I mean, they've obviously put themselves in a sphere in this world where they're not affected by things. Cops, if you're a representative, cops probably don't run into your house and hold you at gunpoint. But for the rest of us, well, that's not so important. So.
Yeah, and there's just way too many cops getting away with all the stuff that they're doing. I mean, you can't go a day without hearing something locally that one of the local cops has done. They're literally taking your cars off the side of the road and having them towed that you've got to pay to get it back out, and that's just a minor assault compared to other things that they're doing. Well, like you were saying,
So
they had shot that kid in Anaheim, and then the people, and then the people were upset about it, and next thing you know, there's a cop dog running loose and attacking a man and tipped over a baby stroller with a baby in it, and they're firing these beanbags.
Well, you live in Pennsylvania. You know what? Let me take this in a different direction. The two main duties of a representative body. If you ask people, what are the two main duties of a representative body? Most people don't even know. But the two main duties, one is to take petitions for redress of grievances. It is actually the job of the legislature to take petitions for grievances. And, today we treat the petition clause as though it was meant for the judiciary. In other words, if you want to petition her, you've got to hire a lawyer and take it to the courts. The original intent of the petition clause was the legislature. The second duty is to investigate and inform. That means haul the executive or haul the judiciary into the legislative, basically the sub-jurisdiction. Basically the legislature meets in full session, with everybody, rarely, and they're supposed to meet in committee. And they're supposed to haul the executive and the judiciary in front of the committee. So you're in Pennsylvania. They had a couple of judges that were basically taking children for money, and they were putting them in jail. Yeah, for cash.
Yep.
There should have been a committee in the legislature that was investigating that. And the problem is, the problem is in your state you don't have enough representation, so the representatives weren't doing that. And I don't know for sure, but in the worst case scenario, perhaps members of the legislature were accepting bribes not to investigate.
I wouldn't doubt it. I really wouldn't.
And
how sad is that to say?
Whereas you have states like New Hampshire and Vermont which actually investigate.
I haven't lived in either of those states. I've lived in a lot of different states, but I haven't made it to those. But even there's some things that are going on that are kind of shady, but I think they've got a better chance of getting it taken care of.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think that we even realize that we're supposed to be going straight to these folks and saying, look, this is what happened, and you need to check this out. And I don't think that we even realize that we're supposed to be telling them what their job is. Here you go, take this, now go do that. I don't even think we realize that.
Yeah. Well, it's gotten to the point, here in California, when you're in high school, they teach you civics. But the reality is, civics is supposed to be a lifestyle. And for people in New Hampshire, they have actual access to the representatives. They actually meet with people who represent them and talk with them. So, anyway. anyway. So anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you've got videos on YouTube.
Yes.
And, they're really, really
good. 2 good long videos.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now, and I accidentally closed the page on where they were. That's wonderful. I hit the wrong button.
Uh-oh.
Oh, goodness.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
so you closed it out.
Yeah, I did, and I was going to give the link to it. Do you have it off the top of your head?
No, I don't. I always search, whenever I go. I basically post links from time to time. I did two videos. One was on state and national representation, and then the second one was on city representation. And I talked about where it needs to be. And there's a group of constitutionalists that live nearby where I'm living right now. And I basically went to their coffee shop. They had a little coffee shop attached to a German repair a company that repairs German cars. And anyway, it's a nice little coffee shop called Glimpses. And I gave 2 speeches, and each of them were about an hour and a half. And it's basically a civics lesson. And I talk about the beauty of a representative body, and not only that, the effects. Like when representation starts going up, government spending goes down, and your taxes go down. So you actually, as a citizen, keep more money. I mean, one of the biggest concerns that a lot of people have is, well, shoot, if the number of reps goes up, shoot, doesn't that mean taxes go up? No, believe it or not, the more representatives, the harder it is to pass. It takes more votes, so the harder it is to pass a law or even a tax law. So you get fewer laws, and you get lower taxes. So these two videos, I go in depth to all the issues that kind of surround representation.
Yep. And I did get the channel. It's Get With the Program Now. And that's on the YouTube channel that your videos are on.
Okay.
Now, just to back up just a little bit, see, that's what I found so brilliant is when I first ran into you, I totally understood, where you were coming with the state representatives. But then when I saw the video on, your local, the ones right there in your town, that is something that's completely doable.
Yes.
So what would be the process then? Would we go to, let's say, the county and say, hey, look, I'm in this town in this county, and we need to have this many reps? Is that what the step is, to go to the county? Or?
Yeah. And basically, you got to find enough like-minded people to work with you on it, because the local government will resist. In fact, every government at every level will resist increases, because when you increase the number of representatives, it dilutes the existing representatives' power.
Right.
And in a proper, I would say, Republican government, it isn't about the power of anybody. It's about the citizens' access and really restraining the executive and judiciary. So you've got to see what your population is, and and basically it comes down to what you can get. I mean, you might shock people, and you say, well, hey, we need, my favorite example is in England. They have inside of London, there's this little tiny city called the City of London. And it has basically 10,000 people living there. And I guess during the day it swells up to 300,000. They have a bicameral legislature of 25 aldermen and 100 common councilors for 10,000 people. And that's really close representation. So the question is, how many people should each representative represent? And that's what you need. And I basically say at the city level, you should have one representative for every 300 to 500 people at most. So you need to take the population and divide it by 300 to 500, and that's the number of reps that, and I mean, for a major city, that could be a heck of a lot of people. But the legislative power is supposed to be the most important, the most powerful branch of government. And so you've got to meet with like-minded people, and you've got to make a campaign. And like I say, if you can come to my page, Project Represent Me, there's contact information and so forth, and I basically help various groups, across the state to achieve this. Because, things are out of control. And, I when I first started in reform, I have a whole bunch of friends who are lawyers, and honest lawyers, which, that's hard to believe, but they are. And they were dealing with corrupt judges. And what they were finding themselves doing was suing judges in front of other judges. Well, that never works. Right. Whatever your problem is, representation is the way to take care of it. And I don't, if you're a prison reform person, if you are a police reform person, if you're just dealing with corruption in general, if you're trying to deal with corruption in the judiciary, you all have one common denominator. It's the legislature that's not doing it. And technically, when you sue a judge in front of other judges, the judges that you're suing have immunity, and judges tend not to want to hold other judges accountable. Right. So the legislature itself can actually hold judges accountable. So the question is, how do you make the legislature more like you? You've got to add more representatives. That's how you do it.
Okay, so step 1, get like-minded people. Step 2, get a petition, or depending on your state.
Yeah. Get a petition, get it drafted up, and start collecting signatures, and you got to get it on the ballot. You got to talk with media. You got to reach out to people with media, in the media, and you need to educate them about the fact. If you can, you want to get the data on the population, show that the population has grown, but the number of representatives hasn't grown. You want to show everybody these things. And you need to say, hey, we need more representatives. I mean, it's like I said, it's funny, like this little town of Dixon. They have a city council, and basically, if they've got, I don't know, they've got a mayor and 4 city council members. Everybody's elected at large, and they have 30 seats in front of the city council. The reality is, for a city of 16,000 people, everybody's not divided. 30 people, well, first of all, most people are sitting at home. Second of all, nobody really knows what the city council is doing. Third, the city council, they're basically, what their job is to vote money away from the citizens and then lavish it on whoever they want to. They have special contracts for trash companies. And basically they're waiving our taxes, using our money inefficiently, and giving it to their friends.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing of it is,
tons of cronyism going on.
Yeah, and the thing of it is we don't know what's going on. And to a certain extent, the bigger the districts get, the more people just, the problems get more complex. Their ability to deal with them is it's like, how do you deal with them? You can't figure it out. And if you try and fight them, all the people who are getting money end up fighting you. And it becomes more difficult to organize against them. The other thing that's happened in America, and I'm going to just say it flat out in America, is the lengthening of the term. And like I say, a friend of mine and myself, we did a study on all the cities in California. And it's absolutely crazy. Everybody, just about everybody, except for 2 or 3 cities, our city councils now have 4-year terms. 4-year terms.
They can do a lot of damage in a week.
Yes. You talk about having a lawyer or let's say a real estate agent you don't like. You can fire them. But you're talking about now, our city council, people who deal with the very problems that we have in our life, and we can't get rid of them for 4 years. When the U.S. Constitution was first made, our founders gave the U.S. House members 2-year terms, and people were like, that's goddamn crazy. They couldn't believe it. 2-year terms? Most city council members sat for half a year, so a full year, and that was it. And yet today we have people who hold office for 4 years. And usually it's not until the last 6 months before their elections they start behaving themselves.
Yeah,
the amount of damage
that's the thing. That's exactly the only time they kind of sort of behave. But they're still not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they just kind of sort of behave.
Kind of. And even if... Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I just get frustrated. I make noises.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and even if they get voted out, what happens is they get provided for in other offices also. So, it's just, what goes on is outrageous. And yeah, like I say, the local level, especially for most citizens, that's, I'm dealing with state level representation. I'm working with other people. There are a couple lawsuits that were filed against the U.S. House. And a number of us are, we're starting to fight this thing. But for most people, their access to government is the local city, where you live. And that's where, the fight really needs to start. That's where, until you increase representation at the city level, your access generally is nil.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about, you were saying something about the reps get put on these different committees. And I don't think people realize that either. So on average, they're on, 2, 3 different committees maybe?
Well, here in California, our state reps, basically, if you have to say, what goes on in California, everything from agriculture to making movies to, all sorts of things. Everything that's done in the state is under the purview of the legislature. I mean, the legislature is considered to have what's called general jurisdiction. They can make laws about anything that goes on in the state, anything. So basically, obviously, all matters cannot be dealt with by the whole legislature. It doesn't work. It's just not. It's not practical. It doesn't work very well. So the legislature does its real work in a committee. Well, California, we have, when it comes to jurisdictional matters, we have over 250 committees. And we only have, in our lower chamber, 80 representatives. So I broke it out, and there was one gentleman in 2009, his name was Kern Price. He was on, it was amazing. He was on over 60 jurisdictions. And, I mean, these things included medical licensing, financial affairs between California and Mexico, international relations. This guy was he was co-chair of the ethics committee for the legislature. One of his jurisdictions were all the utilities up and down the state. So, I mean, those are just five.
All the utilities. So, that would be electric, gas,
water, you name it.
Hydro.
I never looked it up because I just haven't had time. But I mean, how many utilities do we have up and down the state? Hundreds easily. I mean, I've driven by huge electric. And the reality is, he might in his in the 6 years he was in the assembly, he might have gone to about 5 at most. I mean, we're talking. The levy, just the levy in Sacramento. Representatives should go out and see. You know what I mean? Here's the thing. We obviously pay people to go out there. Okay? But what if the people we pay to go out there and look at the levy didn't actually do anything? That doesn't happen, right? You don't pay government officials who do nothing. That never happens, right? Well, the only way you ever find that out is if the people you vote for in the legislature actually go and check it out. Or the other way is the whistleblowing process. If you or I go out there and we see these big holes being sprung in the derrick, we want we have to go back and what happens then? The whistleblowers, usually we get creamed. I mean, a lot of times the legislature they say, hey, go away, kid. Don't bother us. When hey, wait a second. The dam's going to burst. And unless somebody in the legislature or we tend to go to the media because the media, at least they have a greater chance of actually responding to it.
Yeah, so, I think that depends on your local media. I mean, they all read off the same ticker tape, so.
And how far that they are, with the local, and how corrupt they are. But I mean, and the thing of it is, so these people are on so many jurisdictions that, you look at it and there's no way they can do it. One of the things I like to go back to is, remember Bernie Madoff, that businessman who made off with all that money?
Oh, yeah.
There were numerous people who were blowing the whistle on Bernie Madoff, and they went to the SEC in New York. Well, the problem was Bernie Madoff was an advisor to the oversight committee for the SEC in New York. So a guy who was committing this massive scam that the SEC should have covered was working with the agency that was supposed to be overseeing him. And here's the truth: there are more federal agencies than there are members of the SEC. There are more federal agencies than there are members of the U.S. House. Congress cannot watch the federal government anymore. They don't have enough members. And if anybody just thinks that it's just the SEC, all the other agencies are fine. They're all working right? It was just the SEC. Are you kidding? I guarantee you there's major scandals in every federal agency that's out there, major scandals that will not ever be uncovered. And it's because we don't have enough members of the U.S. House. What we're doing now, instead of adding more House members, we add more assistants.
Yeah.
And it happens both federal and state and the state level. According to this one gentleman, he wrote this just fascinating book in 1990. It was called Hill Act. And in this book, he just uncovers the number, the amount of work and the type of work all these assistants
in Congress do. I mean, when they have debates for members, like like a guy's running for re-election in Congress, and somebody's challenging him, and they'll have a debate. And people say, well, Mr. Congressman, what's your stand on this issue? And they want to know what the opponent says on that same issue. And the real question you should ask is, who are you going to hire? What's their stand? Because what's happening is your elected representatives they're abdicating a lot of these decisions. The assistants that they hire are now making these decisions. And I mean, it is scary the amount of power these hill rats have. They're 22 to 27-year-old kids. Well, I was in D.C. myself when I was 23. I got to see it firsthand. The decisions a lot of these young guys and young women make, they're making decisions that you're supposed to be expecting your Congress members to be making. They're not elected. And to a great extent, the reality is your Congress member can't even do it. They can't. It's
well, they don't even bother reading the bills that they're given to each other to pass. They're not even doing that. So why would I think that they're overseeing anything?
I sponsored this one. I'll for yours, you vote for mine.
Pardon me?
I'll vote for yours, you vote for mine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what they do. It's insane. There was a video of the legislature down in Texas, and they were voting for other people who weren't there. They'd push their button, and then they'd turn around and push their neighbor's button, and they'd be not necessarily on the same team, so to speak. A Republican would be pushing the Democrats' button.
Yeah, I watched that happen, and people were voting for other people in ways that person didn't want to vote either. And then when you realize here in California, each one of those buttons represents 500,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, it was that video literally just knocked the wind out of me. I mean, these people were jumping out of their seats to go get to somebody else's empty seat to push the button. It was like a race.
Yep.
I mean,
and that's how laws are made.
Yeah. The last thing we need is more laws. They passed, 40,000 laws just in the past year so far?
Yeah, well, in California, we seem to average about 4,000 new laws every year. And a large percentage of the laws are laws that were passed the year before. They usually have to do with fines, fees, and I don't know what it is right now, but apparently I think not that I'm advocating it's okay, but if you run a stop sign or a red light, that's obviously a bad thing. But that fine has gone from it wasn't very much. You probably had $50, a couple of years ago. Now it's up to like $700.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's
and I guess it sounds like a good price when you're making $250,000 off of the taxpayers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can afford that, so everybody else should be able to. Let's make it an even 1,000 this year. Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing, it's just the number of laws that can just whack you. And I mean, when I say whack you, I mean there was a guy I was reading about the other day. This is at the federal level. He picked up an Indian arrowhead, and all of a sudden he's facing a misdemeanor at the federal level. And you pick up an Indian arrowhead. I don't think the guy was intending to cause a crime. I mean, if you're in a store and you pick something up off the shelf and you walk out without paying for it, that's a more clear-cut crime, unless somebody obviously just forgot about it, and that's dumb, but you still, but I mean, you find something in the ground, hey, that's neat, let's pick it up. You just committed a misdemeanor?
Yeah.
And they had this federal agency was just hammering them. And like I say, these federal agencies, I met with somebody at the Pacific Legal Foundation the other day, and we were talking, and the EPA, apparently about 1,000 to 2,000 people every year get whacked by the EPA. And what I mean whacked, you have some land, you're trying to build on it, or let's say you already own a house on it. The EPA just targets you and goes after you. All of a sudden, you're subject to all these fines, fees, and assessments. That one case, I guess, was out.
Yeah, just because of some weird lizard that was seen on your property one day. Oh no, you can't live here anymore. The lizards want to live here.
Yeah, whatever the gosh dang excuse that they want to do, they'll whack you for it. And you know, like I say, you know, that couple, they were retiring. They bought the land. You know, it wasn't like this, you know, overdeveloped area or anything. And the EPA came, they said it was a watershed. And they're like, no, it's not. There was no watershed there. No, there's a watershed, and we're going to charge you like $10,000 per week and $20,000 for this, $50,000 for that. And it was crazy. And here, you know, this is where it gets, you know, really out of whack. I mean, you know, so Obamacare was in the U.S. Supreme Court a couple months ago. And I was listening to some of the debates in the U.S. Supreme Court, and Congress, I'd heard about this a long time ago, but they were talking about it avidly. It's the Administrative Procedures Act, I think is what it's called. So Congress no longer writes the laws. They've written a law that allows the federal agencies to write laws.
Right.
Okay, let's take it a step further now. Not only that, but we don't have enough federal judges. So what they do is they create judges in these federal agencies and complaint processes, which, you know, in itself sounds decent. You know, hey, you know, so the EPA is harming these. The first person you go to is somebody else in the EPA. Well, you know, they don't really fix their own problems. I mean, internally they don't. And and not only that, they'll have their own judge. Well, guess what? Just like the complaint department, the judge is ruling for itself. Well, no kidding, right? And then he's trying to...
Well, who's he getting paid by?
Oh, yeah.
All these people are getting paid by the same people, you know, and it's with our money.
And they're writing their own laws.
Yeah.
So you've got an executive department that's writing its own laws, that has its own internal complaint process, and its own internal judge, and they're always ruling for themselves. And this is where it comes back to hit you and I, is when you go to sue in federal court, the first thing that they almost always assert is, well, you have failed to complete that process. You have to exhaust what's called your administrative remedies. Well, that's crazy. You're going to the agency that's harming you to try and get redress, and they're not going to help you. They're writing their own laws. They're clearly in conflict. They have their own judges, which are clearly weighted for them, and they hammer you for trying to get these things corrected. And then when you go to court and you try and sue, they say, well, you haven't exhausted your administrative remedies, and what they're basically saying is we haven't beat you down yet. You know, we haven't finished beating you down, you know, and so finally this one case made it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said this is crazy.
Yeah.
You know, this is out of control. So at least the Supreme Court stepped in and said, enough. You know, but like my friend said, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 people get whacked every year by these, you know, just the EPA.
Oh, well, look at all the farmers.
And like I say, what are the jobs of Congress? Well, take petitions, redress the grievances. Hey, you know, so without having to hire your lawyer for, you know, $200 per hour, you know, you should be able to go to your representative in Congress and say, you know, I'm getting hurt here. You know, can you take care of this? You know, and the reality is they're basically conducting drafts for all these wealthy people, making laws for them. The reality is you're a little person and you can't get, you know, bare minimum 2,000. You know, upwardly towards 10,000, where they really feel like you did something. You know, $10,000. You know, I mean, see, the way each member of Congress thinks about it is they have to raise $1 million. It takes about $1 million just to be taken seriously. And a friend of mine was telling me that he says on an average day for a congressman, you have to spend, if you're serious about being a congressman, and most of them are, you have to spend between 2 and 6 hours every day on the phone. And if you're talking to a major corporation like maybe Coca-Cola or Motorola or something like that, you know, one, they don't want to talk to your fundraiser. They want to talk to the congressman. And two, if they're going to give you cash, that cash comes with attachments. No, you will write this law for us. No, you will write that law for us. They don't just give you money for the sake of giving you money.
Oh, by the way, you don't even have to write it because we wrote it for you. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah, they basically write the laws themselves. And you know, and we get back to the hill rat problem with all the assistants. You know, like, you know, we all get upset when, you know, the congressmen, they go on their junkets or you know, maybe a major corporation will set up a speaking tour for, both members of Congress in Congress and people who are retired, who they still owe money to. And what they'll do is they'll basically have them give a speech, and then they'll give them $10,000 after the speech. Well, what's happening is these Hill rats are getting these things. So the assistants, and when I was in D.C., these assistants are getting, they'll have a salmon spread or, a big buffet for the assistants, because major corporations recognize that these assistants are writing the laws.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now the draft isn't just going to our representatives, they're going to our assistants, as I like to say. So rather than having all these assistants, perhaps when they decide they need to have more assistants, maybe we should just put out another rep. That way we can vote for them.
Exactly. Because how do we recall an assistant? We can't. Okay, fine, I'll recall this representative because, they're a total dillwad. But the assistants are still sitting there doing the exact same thing.
And congressional offices usually stay within the same party. So what will happen is maybe the rep will change, but the assistants won't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, nothing changes.
And I don't think these assistants have to take an oath to the Constitution
either. If an assistant is really off level, off board, they'll just move them to a different department. But this one guy who wrote the book, Hill Rat, he says in Washington, D.C., there are about 19,000 assistants.
And we're paying for those, too.
19,000 assistants.
I don't know.
If you go in the...
That sounds kind of like a low number to me.
No, 19,000 assistants for Congress. In the home district, just the U.S. House members, they have 32 to 34 assistants in their home district. So that's another 10,000. And that's not including the number of home district assistants the U.S. senators have. So just the number of assistants that somebody else is coming up with figures for, we're talking 29,000, not including the Senate home district assistants. 29,000. So when we go back to our original figure of 30,001, according to George Washington, we would be talking about 10,000 representatives, which may sound like a lot, but you know what? I think we have more than 10,000 federal agencies at this point in time. Obamacare, I was told that added anywhere between 85 and 120 agencies.
Well, I have to hire new people because of that.
We had executive members. We had agents and agencies like we don't even think twice about it. But if you had a rep, wait a second, that's kind of dangerous. If we gave the citizens a little more access to Congress, that's not that's the real thing they're asking. If you had another rep, oh my God, you're going to give the citizens better access to Congress. Or the other way of looking at it is we're going to have more oversight to the executive and judiciary. That's what it's really about.
So we're literally going to have to get off our derrieres and go get us some more reps then. We're going to have to literally get off of the armchair.
Well, I'm sitting in an armchair right now. I'm not ready to go, but yeah.
No, I didn't mean you had to leave right now. I know that you're out there doing stuff, so I'm not referring directly to you.
But the first problem is that people need to see the problem. Again, my webpage, Project Represent Me, I have a lot of the charts, a lot of the data, and you can contact me on it. So projectrepresentme.com. But the first thing is you got to know the problem. You got to see how it affects everything, and then you got to do something.
And then you've got to tell everybody else. And then convince them to get off their butt. That's the fun part.
Well, it's not even convincing. They're going to be convinced. If any of your family members has been shot by a police officer, if you've basically been robbed by the legislature, if your taxes keep going up, just so you know, it all goes back to the legislature. It's them who did it. I think you were talking to me the other day about political prisoners.
Oh, yes, I did. I'm glad you brought that up because I have my little note here. Lydia Plant out in Washington, she just got put in prison for contempt of court because there was a grand jury that came. They wanted her to testify. They offered her immunity, and apparently, when you're offered immunity, whether you take it or not, you waive your right to remain silent and you waive your right to not incriminate yourself. So, yeah, she was just taken in, I believe it was on the 10th of this month. And it wasn't just her. Yeah, it wasn't just her. There were two of her other friends. But they did a Freedom of Information Act, and they found out that this grand jury had actually been put together for this months before there was a windows breaking during I'll just call it a protest. Some folks had broken windows on a business and whatnot, and so they were investigating this, quote, crime. And these three folks weren't even there at this event. But they had found out that they were already being investigated before this event happened in May. This whole grand jury thing had been put together to indict them. So is there, right now, do you think she could, her and her friends and whoever else has, been imprisoned because of their thoughts about government, do you think there's a way that they could contact the reps that they have now and compel them to
Well,
assist?
they can fly. What state are they in?
Washington. I believe it's Washington.
Okay, yeah, God, Washington, I was up there. Washington State is wonderfully corrupt, and, you can certainly try and contact your representatives because, grand juries tend to be convened by the executive branch. And if you have a lot of representatives, they can start investigating the executive branch and start asking, basically, how are you spending our money? But more specifically, what are you doing? And why are you indicting these people? The grand jury itself isn't evil, but it's the prosecutors who work with judges.
Hello?
Well, the legislature, they would have the right to investigate both the prosecutors, the judges, and heck, they could. They're not supposed to investigate the grand jury. That's where the legislature can't go into. But but the legislature should be able to have access to the people who are being stuck in jail. Absolutely, and really, it's something I realized years ago. We all like to run around and say, we have rights, I have rights, I have my rights. The reality is, the executive branch in America is so big and so powerful that, they can just swipe you. And we're talking, throw you on a gurney and plug diodes into your eyes if they wanted to. Test products on you. Let's try the new type of acid we just developed. They can. I guess to a certain extent we're lucky if that doesn't happen. But it really is the legislature's job to come in and, it's sort of like the Bible, the idea that you'd have a flock or something like that, that you're supposed to watch over or a group of people that you're supposed to work with. Your representative is supposed to watch over you. And if you're grabbed by the executive, darn sure you're hoping that they come in and do something. When the mission gets too big, not only do they not know who you are, they don't want to know who you are. Not only that, they don't want you to know who they are. They don't want you to go in and say, hey, I've got a problem, can we help you? Their job is to make laws for really wealthy people and really to get as much graft for themselves as they can. All of a sudden you say, hey, these prosecutors are indicting people wrongfully. And to them it's like, oh, geez, gosh, we certainly don't want to get involved in that. Well, then why in the hell, one, why in the hell do we have a representative government? And two, why in the hell are we paying taxes? God's going to, you don't pay for something to harm you.
Yeah. They would.
So, as political prisoners, absolutely, they would have an interest in having better representation, because that would stop this garbage from going on. And again, I think we can all agree. Guess what? This stuff goes on, right? I don't think most of us are ignorant at this point in time. I think we're all aware. Guess what? Our government's damaging us, and basically the legislative branch is looking the other way. The executive is doing it. The executive is, it's like during the 50s, in the 60s when you felt like cops were good and stuff like that. Hey, they were upstanding cops, things were good, things were okay. So like they were under their own self-restraint. And today, they keep stretching their arms out and learning how much more they can do. Kickbacks from criminals. And the reality is they're learning that, if something, bad happens, I'm protected. If I shoot somebody, I'm protected. That's basically what the cops are thinking. I mean, unless somebody has a camera right there and they can download it to YouTube immediately. And even then, even that cop who shot the guy in the back in Oakland, the sentence he got was so light, they said, he meant to grab his taser. And it's like, what are you talking about? There are 6 cops sitting on this guy. He's down. You got him. Yeah. You have to pull out a taser and shoot him in the back? Oh, whoops, I grabbed my gun and shot him in the back. Holy crap. And I think the guy got 5 years, and then they let him out early.
Yeah.
That's not something you and I would get. It's just crazy.
Oh, God. No, if I did that, I would expect to get more.
No. Oh, yeah, but you know what I mean. We get 20 years, immediately.
Oh, yeah, so, and if you don't pay your taxes, you're looking at, 50 years then, right?
Yeah, and one of the biggest things our founder said is, that's one of the most important things you can do is refuse to pay your taxes. Mm-hmm. If the machinery of government, if the things you're spending money on are harmful, you should be withholding your taxes. Absolutely.
Yep. That's why I only work for cash. In private deals. I don't let them take anything from me right off the bat.
Yeah.
That's my property. You cannot tax my property. It's my property.
Yeah.
And it's not apportioned the way it's supposed to be either.
Yeah, no. The laws have become that we can tax you anytime we want, any way you want. I'm in the middle of researching the tax code, and it looks like whatever they want to tax you is what they can tax you. It's not really clear what you have a right to say no to under the laws as written.
On the tax code, did you look up the definition for income?
No, I haven't. But that's
look it up. You'll love it. I promise you'll love it.
Okay.
It is so vague. And that's another thing. We're supposed to be, it's our duty to basically ignore vague laws. And they're not laws.
Yeah.
Anything contrary to the Constitution is void. The Constitution says so. And it says, it doesn't say, the Constitution and every single law of the United States is the supreme law of the land in the treaties. It says, and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance. That means it has to be complementary and not be restricting our rights, but further restricting those in government. Because that's what the Constitution is. It's, quote, negative law. It restricts them, not us. Because that's Article 6 right there. That's my favorite article, and my favorite amendment is 9. It says any right that, just because it's not listed here doesn't mean that the people don't have it. And they can't be denied.
I'm a big fan of the 9th Amendment, and fortunately the courts are doing the most they possibly can to restrict it. And
no kidding.
That is one of the most powerful, particularly the 9th over the 10th, because it directly meant the citizens' power.
Yeah, it meant me. And see, this is a challenge that I find, because I'm completely all about rights. Know your rights, claim your rights, enjoy and exercise your rights, but most importantly, defend them by whatever means necessary. You have to defend them. Otherwise, you might as well not have them. So, yeah, the 9th is my favorite with the amendments. It definitely is. But, getting people to realize, they keep saying, my constitutional rights were violated. You don't have constitutional rights. The government has constitutional privileges, and they're temporary.
Restrictions. They have restrictions. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, you don't have constitutional rights here. Please, folks, quit saying it, because it's making me crazy. But I'm sure you go through that too, where you just get so tired of repeating yourself over and over and over. But
well, that's what you got to do. I mean, they say it requires constant vigilance.
Yes, it does.
And our Constitution, is supposed to restrain our government. It's again, when I talk about government, I talk about what I call structuralism. The structure of government has to be built right to support liberty. And right now it's not. And there's a great quote in the Federalist Papers that says the executive and judiciary are few in number. The legislature, on the other hand, is numerous. So what they're saying is the executive branch is supposed to be small and the legislature is supposed to be numerous, where it's just the opposite. Our executive is huge. The legislature is small. And the judiciary is not really big enough either.
Yeah,
but the executive is taking over the other branches of government.
Now, if there's any amendment that I could add, just little me, just add a whole new amendment, it would have to be that the Supreme Court does not get to stay there for life based on...
It does not what?
Does not the Supreme Court, those folks, they don't get to stay there for life just because of good behavior. Because good behavior was never defined. It's vague, so it should be void. So I would void that one out. Definitely that they get a stay there.
Well, actually, good behavior is kind of defined. And see, again, again, I go back to bad judges are a function of the legislature. We have, at the get-go, 1789, there were, and bad behavior is basically what a majority of the reps in any chamber says is bad behavior. They can be tossed for bad behavior. And bad behavior could be taking bribes. Bad behavior can be just mental incapacity. I mean, that was one of the things they had the biggest problem with in the time of our founders, where there was a lot of insanity. A lot of judges were crazy.
Oh yeah.
So that was bad behavior.
Well, wouldn't they get off then for being insane? I mean, that's what some folks are trying to do to get out of the crimes that they committed.
Not always. But again, it takes an act of Congress. And the thing of it is so let's just be honest here. So when Congress is investigating baseball and steroids in baseball, maybe they shouldn't have. But let's just be honest. Congress has 535 members, 535 voting members. They have a capacity of investigation. They have a certain capacity. If they don't increase the number of members, then they can only investigate so many things. So when Congress is investigating the steroid scandal in baseball, that means they're not investigating other things.
Well,
it means they might not be
investigating themselves.
They're certainly not, they'll investigate themselves a little bit, but you know what I mean. They're not investigating all the things that need to be investigated. So if there is a judge who's senile or corrupt or whatever, I mean, the last judge that they impeached was Judge Porteous. And prior to that, the last impeachment was 1992. No, not 1982. So it had been over 30 years since they'd actually impeached a federal judge. So Porteous was appointed by Bill Clinton, and he sat in the Big Easy. He was in New Orleans, and it looks like the guy had been taking bribes for about 16 years. Practically from the time he got appointed by Bill Clinton, he was drinking, gambling, and getting, they flat out said he'd borrow $100,000 from a law firm and never pay it back.
Wow.
So he was Yeah, so he was taking bribes. I mean, there was a case because of him. It was called Wildeburg versus Health Services. This person went to the hospital at Louisiana State University. I think it was LSU, Louisiana State University, and anyway got harmed. Made the assertion that one of the doctors harmed him, for whatever reason. So they brought a lawsuit in federal court, and Porteous was the trial judge. And conveniently, Porteous said he forgot that he was a member of the Board of Trustees for LSU.
I'm sorry. Yes, I forgot I'm a host on Awake Radio. I totally forgot.
Yeah. You're on the board of trustees for LSU, and you forgot. And a lawsuit's been brought in 22 against LSU, and you forgot. And so it made its way all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. They reversed it, and they made a ruling, what was called the right to vacate. A vacator is basically what the ruling was. So because it was just so awful, if the common citizen, would do all the facts, which is you got a judge who's on the board of trustees for this college, was making a ruling on a matter against the college, you'd know that just stinks to high heaven and hell. And therefore the plaintiff had a right to vacate the decision and have it retried. I don't know what happened with the case after that. It doesn't matter because what happened there was right. Yeah, you got a judge who's sitting on the board of trustees. She never sat on the case. So the Supreme Court in their oversight function is kind of looking the other way, and yet this guy is doing stuff like this for 16 years. 16 years we had a federal judge damaging people. And to a certain extent, and I mean this when I say it, I start questioning, what are judges there for? They're there to resolve problems, disputes. And you got a guy who's been in there for 16 years. How many disputes did he actually resolve properly? That's a reasonable question. The reality is, because Congress couldn't oversee the judiciary, you got this guy harming people. And the worst, the biggest insult of all is we're paying taxes for this crap.
Yeah. Yeah, I just get so frustrated I can't even come up with anything to say.
Yeah, and this is where I stop and I'll say, no, I'm making it up, right? It's not really that bad, is it?
I wish
it
it
is. Yeah. Like you say, you got somebody who's, they hold federal prosecutors and federal judges are holding a grand jury, and they're just hauling people in and throwing them in jail. Yeah, well, guess what? There's no one who's going to be investigating them. And you've got Holder in front of that congressional committee. Basically they sold weapons, they sent them to Mexico, gave them to somebody, a bunch of our guys got shot and killed by them.
Yeah. And
they're
he's
not doing
the
anything
street.
to Holder. Okay, we got it. And he said no. Yeah. Wait a second. You got a guy who apparently called in the orders to say that, we're sending guns down to these drug dealers in Mexico. I mean, not only that, Holder's pretty much against the common citizen having weapons.
No kidding.
And
I wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah, and yet at the same time he's going to a foreign country and giving a foreign, not giving, well, let's be honest, Mexican government's probably involved in the drug trade to a fair extent too, and probably our government as well, whatever. But he's giving these basically these drug cartels are getting weapons, funded by the U.S. government, and very easily those same guns that we're giving can be aimed at you and me, and so Congress has found that out, and now what? Nothing. And it's because each U.S. House member, they've got a re-election rate at 94%. And here's the reality: if because that one action of just what Holder is doing, if that one action was enough for any citizen to say, my congressman, what are you doing about it? You're not doing anything. You're out. And if we could actually collectively throw them out, well, I guarantee you they'd do something about it. But the fact of the matter is, the bigger the districts, the fewer people who bother voting. And so what happens is it really becomes the employees, basically people who get kickbacks from the government, they vote. And the rest of us don't. And what happens is they can stay in. And in incredibly perverse circumstances. So, what's happening is we're funding the very people who hurt us, and we can't run them out. and their oversight functions obviously curtailed, and their ability to restrain the executive, that, that's non-existent. I mean, we got taxes that are solid. Yep, guess what? Holder was involved, and yet we're not doing anything. I mean, and there's talk, and I've read articles, apparently Congress has the power to jail Holder if they want to. Well, I'm not going to hold my breath because that ain't going to happen.
Oh,
and if we found out that, if we found out that, he was involved in some other scandal, maybe he was also running guns to Venezuela. There's no report saying that, but, let me just throw it out there. What if we found out Holder was running guns to Venezuela? Well, to a certain extent, that's not, not as bad because, I mean, at least, Venezuela doesn't share a border, to the south of America, but Mexico does. I mean, our own Attorney General is running guns to nefarious agencies that, not nefarious agencies, but, enemies of the state, for God's sake, that come to America selling drugs and they're shooting people, and we're arming them. And this is your tax dollar at work. And Congress has discovered this, and they're not doing anything. The one main job of the legislature is to restrain the executive. Like I say, take petitions for redress grievances and investigate and inform, and we're not done. And it could all be held back to the fact that we don't have enough representatives in Congress.
Yeah. Hypno Steve on the chat box here in Awake Radio posted this little link here. It's from the Sacramento CBSLocal.com. And the headline, it's kind of funny. Yuba City pays man to stop frivolous ADA lawsuits. Apparently this guy is... I'll just read this. Okay. And I'll try to do it without laughing. I really will. Okay. And this came out on the 13th, so 3 days ago. Wow, this is new then. Am I looking at the right year? I am. Okay, 3 days ago. This is brand new. Awesome. A disability debacle is playing out in Yuba City as officials are paying a man to stay away. And it's because of he's cashing it. Let's see. Let me scroll through this. Yuba City officials say the man is attacking small business owners with frivolous lawsuits. The settlement agreement is the first of its kind in the state. Wow. Okay. There you go, California. And while it does give the city and business a moment of relief from it also opens the floodgates for others to cash in on their decision. So it goes. I'm scrolling down. See, I tried without laughing. The city agreed to pay George Louis $15,000 for him to stop bringing frivolous lawsuits against them and area businesses. There's your tax money, honey.
Yeah, I know. There are people who, they have disabilities, and somebody says it's so hard to open a business. I mean, you want to talk about frivolous. Let's talk about just the state and all the requirements that they have for you to open a business. Just the amount of fees, and then all of a sudden, and I don't care what anybody says. Guess what? When you run a business, you want people to be happy. And you want everybody to be as happy as you can. And if you can, there are disabilities. You want disabled people coming into your restaurant. You want that. You want the money that they're going to bring. What, we're going to throw somebody out because they're disabled? No. If they can pay for a meal, or if they can use your services to provide, you absolutely want them coming in. But you can't always accommodate for everybody, and accommodation for more people gets more expensive. I mean, you get to the point where only McDonald's or other major corporations can accommodate all these people. And so you'll get somebody who's, either blind or whatever, or in a wheelchair, and what they do is they'll go to every business, and they'll hijack them. They will hijack them. You know what? You don't have a ramp at a long enough slope. And so therefore, they can threaten them with an ADA lawsuit. And I mean, we're talking, thousands of dollars, and for not just thousands, it's for every business they do this with. I mean, just the fact that you have to hire a lawyer to defend this. I mean, you got a retainer that you look at. Well, that's like, that could be anywhere between $1,000 and $10,000 right off the bat.
Oh,
how many people have $1,000 to $10,000 that they can just throw up out of the blue? And it's not because they're necessarily, these aren't malicious people for the most part. Listen, they're trying to accommodate as many people as they can. Hell, they probably didn't build it because they had fees, so many other things the state had for health, this or that.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, what you're talking about is so what the city did is they found one guy that was running around and shaking everybody down. Well, shoot, they paid him off and made an agreement not to do it. Which that in a way is so perverse because, in certain ways, if you're making an ADA claim, you're claiming a right that you as an individual, as a disabled individual, you don't need to be accommodated. And the reality is, all you're doing is just fighting to harass people. And so what they did is they paid him off not to harass people. Well, then he didn't want the right in the first place. He's just giving away his right to harass people. And you're right. So what you did is just open the door for somebody else. Okay, Larry, I shook everybody down. Now it's your turn.
Yeah. I'm next. I'm coming to Yuma City. Watch out, California.
Yeah,
now, this is where I do have a problem with this. Because as a business owner, wouldn't I be able to reserve the right to, refuse services to people? So maybe, I'm
right.
like, yeah, maybe I'm like Peter Griffin, off of Family Guy, where he just didn't want to have handicaps in his place anymore, even though one of his best friends is handicapped. Doesn't he have that right as a business owner? I can't get a job in a sushi bar. I'm not Japanese. I can't get a job in a Mexican restaurant.
I took constitutional law several years ago, and what that comes down to is the Commerce Clause, at least what the Supreme Court claimed. And there was a case, I think it was called the Heart of Atlanta Hotel, and I forget who the challenging party was, but they didn't allow a couple of if a husband was black and a wife was white or vice versa. The guy flat out said, "You're not staying at my hotel." And what they said was because enough people stayed at that hotel and they entered interstate commerce that because of that they violated the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Now, strict civil libertarians should, you and I have both been to restaurants at various times where they have a sign mounted that says we reserve the right to refuse service, and that's what you're kind of asserting. And I'll even take it a step further. I know that there are businesses out there that what I would call handicap friendly. In fact, they probably cater to them. In fact, and I don't think I'm wrong for saying it. There are probably places that handicapped people congregate at. I was at a pizza place about 5 years ago, and I can't believe it's been that long. But it was funny because there were all these deaf people, and what was really interesting to me was they were kind of you see similar people with similar backgrounds hanging out. Like one guy looked sort of gangsterish, and one chick looked sort of hippie-ish, but they all had sign language, and so they were all and it's possible that a business caters specifically to deaf people. Or something like that. So hey, I'm gonna make a restaurant, for that. And if other people can't accommodate it, if we can get there, I think that's fine. Because the other way is that we're just raping people. In this society, we're supposed to make money because you had merit, because you did a business really well. Well, we're going the other way. How do I shake this business down?
Right. Now, going back to opening a business these days, I would love for someone to get a time machine, go back and get Henry Ford and have him open up his, automaking company again and see if he could do it this time. I would love to see somebody do that. There is a time machine, by the way, that is patented on the U.S. patent. I found it.
Oh, really?
So somebody can actually go make it. You can make it, you just can't sell it.
Well, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and make damn sure that the founders made sure that we had adequate representation, because that's the biggest problem. If you fix that,
yeah, there would be a few things. Yeah, there'd definitely be a few things I would change, like Congress, shall hear impeachment and treason. What if it's Congress that's doing the treason? Then who hears it? They left it all with the Congress. Yeah. Well, they're committing treason. What do I do? Where do we go now?
Yeah, nowhere. You can't. Yeah, the courts can't hear that case. Yeah, no, people in Congress, they don't hold each other accountable. No, they have to. I mean, the last woman, I'm forgetting her name, but she was down in Los Angeles. She's a black congresswoman.
Hello, which one?
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, her husband owns a bank, and it's pretty clear that she was helping write legislation to favor her husband, and getting favorable. And basically they had her up on scandal charges, and then all of a sudden that all just disappeared.
Yes. Anyone say conflict of interest?
Yeah. Well, I mean, back in the day, people in Congress actually held each other accountable, but it really only happened when the districts were small. And today, there's no, like I say, they don't hold the executive branch accountable. Well, guess what? They don't hold each other accountable. So there's no accountability. And like I say, the districts are so big. There's a 94% reelection rate. Well, shit, that means 6% of the.
I lost you. Are you there? Hello?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah. No, you're there. Just broke up.
Yeah.
Must be the
timeline. 95. There's a 95% reelection rate. Well, shoot, that means, and I know that, but Congress, their favorability is like, they're like at 20%. So if you have 20% favorability, what that should translate to mean that only 20% of people keep their seats, right? No, 95% of them keep their seats.
Yeah. Well,
so
look at how long Ted Kennedy was in.
Yeah.
And there was that big, huge thing where these girls were raped at his house, and I mean, come on. And he still kept getting elected after all that?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. Yeah, you need a few people that are in there for a long time, but you also need new blood, and you need lots and lots of new blood. You need what's called institutional memory. You need people who've been in there for a while. But the problem is you get a Byrd, you get a Strom Thurmond, you'll get a, what was that guy, the other guy from South Carolina. I mean, for a short period of time, South Carolina had one senator who had been in there eight terms. That's 56 years. And then the other senator was in there for 7 terms. Well, that's 42 years. So, I mean, you had 90...
Ron Paul's over 3 decades.
You need a certain amount of institutional memory.
Yeah.
You need people in there, but you need a lot of new people. You need people who've been in there for a long time. But the thing of it is everybody's in there for as long as they want. So the thing of it is their contact with and even the people who get in there, the new people who get in there, they got in there because they worked with unions for 15 years, or they were a multi-millionaire. I don't even know the last time a common citizen got elected to Congress. I mean, somebody like me, or I mean, you don't get elected unless you get a lot of favors. You're part of an industrial association. You're part of a union. You did something, and the reality is you get in there because you're bought and sold already, not because you're going to help people.
Well, are we just down to the point of good people just either not being able to get in or just say, you know what, forget it? I'm not going to be able to do anything if they do get in.
They can't get in, and what it comes down to is the size of the district. I mean, like I say, in New Hampshire, they got 3,000 people. And I've got the data collected on it. Again, if you go to my webpage, projectrepresentme.com, you got, like New Hampshire, the winners spend $1,000 on the race. The losers spend $1,000 on the race. Your average person can raise $1,000. In Vermont, where the districts are 4,000, the amount of money spent doubles. So the winners spend $2,000, the losers spend $2,000. You get up to California, where the districts are 500,000 people. The winners are now spending. They don't even spend; they raise. They raise $500,000.
Right.
The winners, California, raise $500,000. The losers raise about $40,000 because they don't have $500,000. And the district's so big that you can't run if you don't, and you can't meet everybody. Like in New Hampshire, where you have districts of 3,000, you can meet everybody in the district. You can. You have that chance. Well, here you don't. And so your election rate correlates with the amount of money you raise. And the incumbents can always outraise you. Unless you have a personal fortune, unless you throw it at it, you will get beat.
Do you think that, I don't know, do you think people have a better chance, with this whole local, getting in locally, like the county sheriff?
Yeah, but no, the same thing happens, especially here in California, where the cities are huge. I mean, we got cities, L.A. County is bigger than all but 10 states. I mean, local representation, that's always the big thing. But see, the problem is, again, like I say, we have five reps. So, let's go to the Pacific nearby. Oh, no, let's go with Fairfield. Fairfield's nearby. They've got 5 city council members and 100,000 people. And they're elected at large. So you got to get the majority of a city. So whether it's the city or the state level, the districts are so big they keep the common. And again, our founders are big on the concept of tyranny. Too much power, too few hands is tyranny. When you have 5 people representing 100,000, let's take that for an example. You've got a 5-man city council. How many votes does it take to raise everybody's taxes? 3. I want people to think about that. If you have 100,000 people in a 5-man city council, how many people does it take to vote to raise your taxes? 3. How about the powers of eminent domain? If you have a 5-man city council, how many people does it take to take your house? 3 votes.
I'm glad you put it that way, because that should make people's hearts jump. It really should.
3 people can decide to take your house through the eminent domain process. That's crazy. The idea that it only takes a mere 3 votes on a 5-man. I mean, how many votes do you think it should take to get, we were talking earlier about what representation should be. How many votes do you think it should take to take your house? Because that's where you should start.
None, because it's mine.
But you know what I mean.
And if they do take it, then I get just compensation, and I get to say what just compensation is.
Well, not necessarily. It's more. I actually have the original code in California for eminent domain, and they at least let you have a jury.
Right.
They at least let you have
it's got to be. Well, if the Constitution says if the controversy is over $20, I hope your property is worth more than $20.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do that courts are all about taking juries away from people. I mean, most controversies don't even see a jury. I don't think I don't think that 1 in 100 cases that are filed in court today should be a jury. I'm not kidding when I say that. I mean, a large bulk of cases get dismissed right off the bat, and I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. There's a lot of frivolous lawsuits that are filed that get thrown out, and thank God they get thrown out. But I mean, real controversies where a citizen was harmed, and let's say in the eminent domain process, you should see a jury. Absolutely.
Oh, no kidding.
If they have a bona fide legitimate reason for taking your property, we absolutely have to do it. It makes sense. But then what I've seen the government do, and again, like my friend at the Pacific Legal Foundation, so they're just taking, 1,000 to 2,000 people find themselves attacked by the EPA. And what we're seeing, and what I'm seeing, is people having their property taken and given no compensation at all. The government just came in and shoved you. Sorry, you're out of luck. Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah.
So again, we go back to how many votes do you think you should? I mean, I'm just saying, let's recognize that the city has the power to take your property. So how many votes should it require? And that's where you should start for representation. I think it should take a good 70 or 100 votes. Well, then if that's it, then double that. That means you need 140 to 200 reps. But the idea that 3 people can vote to take your house, that should scare the living hell out of people. When I give speeches, that's one of the places I go to first. How many, if you have a 5-man city council, how many votes does it take you to raise your taxes? Because here's the funny thing. Everybody who's getting paid, we're talking with cops and everybody like that and so forth, they know how many votes that they need to get to raise taxes to pay their salaries.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
And they have direct access to them. We don't. You and I don't. They have direct access to them. The police, they've gotten to the point where the executive controls the elections. They know how to run their salaries up. They don't really care what you're paying on your house, what your property taxes are. They don't care. In fact, like in California, we have outrageous taxes here. There are cities that have sales taxes almost towards 12% now. 12%. They have local assessments and taxes that are run, so you buy something for $1, you're paying 12 cents on top of it in taxes, and they're trying to raise more. Government almost knows no bounds for wanting to extrapolate money. They don't care. And a lot, these people are providing services that we want or we don't want. Hey, we'll cut your services. I don't give a damn. I don't want them. This is what I'd pay for if I was given that amount of money anyway. But these people are getting gross salaries are starting to push the legislature around and just raise their own salaries. They don't care. They don't care if they run taxes up to the point that you and I, who run a business, can't possibly operate. And like they say, the idea that on a 5-man city council, it only takes 3 votes to take your house. That should scare the hell out of everybody. Oh, by the way, you got a 5-man city council, and anybody, I'd have to guess that like at least 70% of cities across America have just 5 members, no matter how big your city is. They all have 5 people who control everything. 3 people can take it all.
Yeah, that is definitely scary, especially the way you put it like that. It's just, wait a minute. I'm totally for, the way our republics are supposed to be running. My house, on the other hand, does not run that way. This is definitely a monarchy type of situation. But that's because there's a kid here. What happened to our train of thinking to where we are letting the 3-year-old climb on the counter, get the cookies that we said they can't get, and then when they're busted, we tell them, you know what, come up with your punishment. Where did we lose this?
A long time ago. And see, the thing of it is, it's progressive. It's not like it all stopped one day. It just don't work.
Well, I don't know. Looking back at, through the history and the numbers that, wanted to leave the king and start anew, those numbers were actually very small.
Yeah.
And that alone gives me a little bit of hope, knowing that, a small group who, as long as they are willing to be, responsible for themselves and defend themselves, then, we've got a fighting chance, I think. Right now, though, the tables have definitely gotten so heavy with the folks on welfare. I mean, things keep going this way, they're not going to be having any welfare checks coming in because everybody's going to be on it. We're and
everybody's stealing from each other in this process too. It's pretty bad.
Yeah,
and
that's my main problem with the Occupy folks. The majority that I've run into actually have their hand out. They want their free education. They want their health care. They want this. They want that. And I ask them all the time, where do you think this money's coming from? Well, it's coming from the government. How does the government get their money? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, from us.
Yeah.
So what you're basically asking the government is to take from somebody else to give to you. I mean, because the government doesn't have anything that we don't have.
Right. But here with these occupiers, they yell at people for being greedy, these corporations and these business owners, even mom and pop diner, they're greedy. And I'm trying to figure out, when did, being self-reliant and self-responsible and taking, doing what you want to do, become greedy versus asking the government to take something from someone else to give to you? Which one is the greed? I don't know. Uh-oh. I lost him. Again. Hold on, folks. I'm calling him back. We've got gremlins on the wire. So while I'm calling back, folks, stay tuned because coming up in 4 minutes, we've got UK Column with Pondy coming up, and we are calling him back.
Hello?
I lost you again.
Uh-oh.
And we are live still. I just called you right back. So, yeah, I was going off on my great tangent.
Like I say, this issue is key. It's central. It comes down to representation. If you don't have enough reps, like we do, have not enough reps, then your government's going to be out of control and you're going to have problems. And that's where we're at. And, my webpage is projectrepresentme.com, and whoever's listening, if they want to go, if they want to have their 2 cents, if they'd like to contact me, that's how you can do it.
Yeah, and I definitely highly suggest that folks watch your videos, and it's on the YouTube channel Get With The Program Now. And you were also on William Wagner's show as well.
Yeah, William Wagner did a number of videos with me, and I, it's really good what I would call civics pieces. I sit on, I sat down and I started studying, as I was going through my own personal hells, studying what representation meant and how it was supposed to be and things like that. And so, if anybody has any questions or wants to know how or why things are supposed to be a certain way, I get into it. So, yeah, just Google Michael Warnken on YouTube, and you'll invariably run into a lot of my videos where I talk about representation and I talk about civics.
Yeah, and the way you spell his last name, it's really easy. W-A-R-N as in Nancy, K-E-N as in Nancy again. It's really easy. In fact, I think I've Googled you so much that Google just automatically goes to Warnken after I type the L in Michael.
You can give me a big head.
Or maybe just so many people are doing it, Google's going, oh, we know who you want.
Yeah, well, that's good. Like I say, the most important thing is that people see this problem. I mean, until I found it, I didn't even know it was a problem. And most people don't even know it's a problem until they see it. And I'm trying to educate people to see that representation is a real issue and what it looks like. And once you see it's a problem, then you can do something about it. When you're fighting the system, to know what the problem is, that's the first step. You can't do anything about it until you know what the problem is.
Oh, exactly. And the thing that I really love about this is, one, it's viable. It's a viable solution. And two, this is something that folks in other countries can start going after as well. It's not just here.
Most other countries have better representation than we do. I mean, you look at Iceland, they have one representative for every 5,000 people. What do? They threw the bankers out. Can you name another country can you name another country that did that? And no, not really.
Well, I thank you so much for coming on, and I hope that you come back very, 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 very soon.
Okay.
We've hit the hour. We've hit the top of the hour here. I hate cutting you off.
Well, thank you for having me on there. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to get you back as soon as possible.
Okay.
Now, you are looking at going around the nation and talking to folks too, right? So folks can get you in to come to their area and talk?
Okay, yeah. ProjectRepresentMe.com.
All right, that's where folks need to go, and then get him to come down to your area so he can give the awesome talks that he does to your neighbors and the folks in your town and get everybody on board to do this?